How does the third world think? It's a question that we, the opponents of mass immigration and multiculturalism, rarely grapple with, but it is important because if left unchecked, the growth of these diasporas and demographics in our country will fundamentally transform our culture because they don't share the same moral priors or theory of mind as we individualistic Westerners do. Fortunately, we have the writings of people descended from that part of the world who have moved over here, who are outliers and perhaps slightly more intelligent and less ethnically clannish than the people who they were born amongst, and they explain to us how people from that region of the world think. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare and contrast a couple of examples from the last week from the UK and US of third world behaviour, and then attempt to explain through the words of third world heritage authors why these people do the things that they do. The first example is an attempted honour killing that happened in Washington State in the US. Now, the US has not had the same volume of Muslim migration as the UK and Europe, but that doesn't mean you're not going to still get these problems. These people bring these problems everywhere they go because it is endemic to their clannish family structure and their Islamic faith. And so it's just a problem of scale. It's not a question of if, but where and when. And so if you guys don't stop mass Muslim migration, you will experience this. Now, I'm going to be talking throughout this, by the way, mainly about the Middle East and Africa, particularly the Islamic world. I don't have much to say about Central and South America because we don't have much of that kind of migration over in the UK. The only remark I will make is that I don't think centuries of ritualistic child sacrifice will result in elite human capital. Perhaps I'm just prejudiced. Anyway, in this particular case, you've got a mother and father. This is Ihsan Ali and Zahra Subhi Mohsin Ali, who attacked their daughter Fatima on October the 18th, 2024. It was caught on video there, as you can see. Ihsan was jailed for 14 months for second-degree assault, 12 months for unlawful imprisonment to be served concurrently, and given 18 months of community custody and banned from seeing his daughter for 10 years and interacting with her boyfriend, who is black and not a Muslim, Isaiah, for at least 2 years because he got 182 days in prison for fourth-degree assault because he punched her boyfriend, who was 16 at the time, in the face. This is because his daughter was fleeing an arranged marriage he had set up with an older man in Iraq. And arranged marriages are very common in the Islamic world because you treat your daughters like a commodity, and the marital arrangements that you set up for them can confer either honor or shame on your family, and this can result in reputational damage, economic penalties, and so this is why honor killings are common, because if your daughter is a net detriment to the family's honor, it actually restores honor by killing her rather than allowing her to go and live a westernized liberal life. And this is why so-called moderate Muslims who move to the West hunker down in these ethnic enclaves and actually entrench in their tribal, clannish, and doctrinally Islamic behaviors in reaction to the secular, liberal Western world waiting on their doorstep. They actually radicalize, or rather become more devout and fanatical, according to their core texts, in reaction to the world around them. They don't assimilate, quite the opposite. But the most interesting part of this story is actually the judge in this, because it shows that multiculturalism was not, as promised, an intermingling of cultures to create a melting pot, a enriched milieu of interesting and exotic cuisines and beliefs. Instead, it's two parallel traditions racing towards each other like trains on a track, heading for collision, or tectonic plates that rub up against each other and cause cultural tsunamis or earthquakes or sort of geysers of conflict that erupt and have splash damage and cause lots of casualties. So during the course of this is Judge Shayla. The judge ruled that the trial prosecutors couldn't bring up the arranged marriage, even though it is key to the case, and the judge didn't allow Fatima to talk in detail about a family trip to Iraq when she was 16, essentially to set up the transactional marriage in question. The veracity of the arranged marriage claim is less clear. The article for the Daily Mail writes, and by the way, we wouldn't even know about this if the Mail itself hadn't obtained hundreds of pages of police reports detailing the interviews that Fatima had. The story would have been hermetically sealed by the judge. But the Mail writes, the veracity of the arranged marriage claim is less clear, but it was wholly denied by the defence during the trial. Quote, the entirety of the claims appears to be the result of Islamophobia, Ihsan's lawyer, the father, Eric Kading, wrote in his own memorandum. There is no evidence of either honour killing or arranged marriage supported by the evidence uncovered in the investigation of the case, other than the fact they were beating her and attempting to strangle her on video. So, what you have to understand, this is the reason why the grooming gang perpetrators always plead not guilty every time, is that guilt and innocence is not a concept that relates to the individual conscience in this part of the world. Instead, being honest can bring dishonour on the family collectively, so you will lie if you think you can get away with doing something evil so that you do not disgrace your family in the eyes of the Muslim collective who will judge and shame you. And also, if you do not recognise the authority of the liberal or Christian secular Western institutions, then you don't see what you have done as a crime by their standards. And so their attempt to impose their standards on you is Islamophobic. It was a term invented, of course, by the Muslim Brotherhood to insulate Islam from criticism in the same way that Jewish activists after the atrocities of the Holocaust or gay rights activists in the 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s did for their respective identities. But in this instance, the term is being used to describe the imposing of foreign standards, our standards, on Islam, on these tribal, sectarian, self-governing enclaves that have taken root in our country and are not content to live by our rules, and they never will. This is the illuminating part about this trial. Also, it says, the reason for Judge Shayla's rulings that kneecapped the prosecution's case was that their inclusion would unjustly prejudice the couple in the eyes of the jury. Of course, what you're getting here is the rubbing up against each other of cultures, and the liberal state which presumes itself to be the governing philosophy, the sort of the container in which all other traditions can mix and sit. They are trying to make these traditions play nice. And so they are trying to manage the perceptions of the hosts, we Westerners, of these people. And so they are trying to omit the ugly but intrinsic parts of these cultures from public knowledge so that you don't have a negative judgment of them, because they think that our negative judgment of these people is the only thing stopping them becoming indistinguishable from us, because deep down, thanks to the blank slate, they're all exactly the same. And so they don't understand the mindset that is brought by these people that is completely incompatible and unwilling to be compatible with the way that we live. And the best person that has articulated this is actually Ayaan Hirsi Ali in her book Heretic from 2016. There is a passage where she describes why Islamic honor culture happens, and I'll just read it to you here. Anthropologists since Ruth Benedict's study of Japan in World War II have made a distinction between shame cultures and guilt cultures. In the former, social order is maintained by the inculcation of a sense of honor and shame before the group. If our behavior brings discredit on our tribe, it may punish or even expel us. In a guilt culture, by contrast, a person is taught to discipline himself by means of his own conscience, sometimes backed up by the threat of punishment in the life to come. Most Western societies went through a 1,000-year transformation from shame to guilt, a process that coincided with the gradual breakup of tribal family structures. Europeans underwent a long process of detribalization, beginning with subjection to Roman law, conversion to Christianity, the imposition of monarchical rule over baronial power, and the gradual rise of nation-states with their concept of individual citizenship and equality before the law. So all of these are based on distinctly Christian foundations, and particularly Western family structures with low rates of cousin marriage. If you have a high rate of cousin marriage, if you have a high rate of incest, which happens commonly in the Muslim world and in Africa, then your entire focus is around your ethnic and familial in-group. So you don't extend moral consideration outside of that in-group, and you do everything you can to advantage that in-group, meaning lying, cheating, and stealing is permissible. And in fact, if a person falls for your lies, your scams, your theft, then they are the sucker, and you're actually more intelligent than them, and so you have an obligation to take advantage of people if and where you can, because it is to the benefit of your collective, rather than having a kind of Jiminy Cricket gnawing away at you in your ear that was instilled in people thanks to, yes, a reduction in cousin marriage, but also and Larry Siedentop's written very well about this, the idea that the Logos places a burden on the individual to understand and articulate and enact their morality. This comes from ancient Greece, of course, but is given flesh, as it were, in the Christian tradition. None of this is present in the Islamic world, and none of this is present in the largely illiterate and very tribal regions of Africa. So this is not a concept that can cross-pollinate between civilizations. Even if these people are brought here into our civilization, they still bring their tribal, clannish, honor-based value system with them. Ayaan writes, "The Arab world in which Islam first triumphed did not undergo a similar transformation. As Anthony Black writes in The History of Islamic Political Thought, quote, Muhammad created a new monotheism fitted to the contemporary needs of tribal society. The effect was to perpetuate tribal norms by freezing them in place as holy writ. Arabs can see themselves as the chosen people with a mission to convert or conquer the world. According to Muhammad, each of the great monotheistic religions was an ummah, a global Muslim race, a community or nation defined by its adherence to the teachings of its prophet. Jews were defined as an ummah through their adherence to the Book of Moses. Christians were defined as an ummah united by adherence to the teachings of the prophet Jesus. The Islamic ummah, however, was meant to supersede these other groups. Within the ummah, all Muslims are brothers and sisters. And so, how Muslims see it, they have solidarity with their family, with their clan, with the global Muslim race, which is at odds with other religious-based races. So they see themselves in constant racial conflict with the Christian people of the West, and also with us on ethnic and familial lines. So not only are there barriers to integration just because of how they think and their family structure, but also they are hostile at the outset to the prospect of integrating, so they will not be won round, even if the process itself is going to be slower than trying to integrate other Europeans, for example, or even people from South Korea and Japan who, yes, have a more collective morality and a clannish family structure, but do not have the same theological hang-ups that people from the Muslim world do. Ayaan writes, "Yet this notion did not displace the older ties of bloodline, as it is set down in the Quran. Quote, blood relations among each other have closer personal ties in the decree of Allah, than the brotherhood of believers. Despite the rise of pan-Islamic religious identity in which all individuals notionally submitted to Allah, Islam therefore retained elements of the shame culture." And so this is why there are concentric circles of loyalty in the third and Muslim world and in ethnic enclaves in our country. Pakistanis are incredibly clannish. There are familial clans within Pakistani communities, but the broader Pakistani community will come to defend one another against negative judgments from the Western host majority because of the behaviors by the Pakistani community, like selling drugs and engaging in crime and abusing English children. And then, more broadly, they will lobby on behalf of Islamic interests. And this is why there are members of other ethnicities, but the Muslim faith, participating in the Muslim grooming gangs up and down our country. It's because they have concentric circles of loyalty to family, then clan, then ethnicity, and then ummah, global Muslim race. Nowhere in that equation are the people living alongside them, the native Christian or even atheist Westerners, who largely are paying for them to be in their countries. Again, integration is not possible because the thought never enters their heads, and if they are presented with the prospect, they have an antibody reaction to the idea because it violates all of their moral priors. It's just not going to happen. Ayaan writes, "From its origins as a new faith community, Islam had the overwhelming need to remain unified or risk reverting back to tribal fragmentation. The first schism over the question of succession nearly led to the collapse of the religion. Within Islam, fitna, that's strife or disagreement, was therefore seen as fundamentally destructive. And this is why you get lots of young Muslims, as we'll see in Ed Husain's Among the Mosques, saying things like going on Facebook because you might encounter female profile pictures, or walking through white majority areas that still have pubs present a temptation to indulge in sin and is therefore fitna. So women should stay permanently in their homes, clothe themselves from head to toe in black. All pubs in our region should be closed. There should not be any alcohol present. We shouldn't even be allowed to carry bags of alcohol for other people because it would be an invitation to sin. And so there will be no integration because integration itself is fitna, strife, the opportunity to break from their religion. Again, isn't going to happen. Ayaan writes, dissent was a form of betrayal, heresy as well. These individualistic impulses had to be suppressed to preserve the unity of the larger community. Those who wonder at the ferocity of Islamic punishments for dissent failed to grasp the threat the skepticism and critical thinking were believed to pose. In a clan setting, shameful behavior constitutes a betrayal of the bloodline. In the wider Islamic setting, heresy constitutes a comparable threat, as does outright unbelief, apostasy, both of which are punishable by death. Those who betray the faith must be weeded out to maintain the integrity of the Ummah. This belief in the danger of dissent has powerful consequences, but perhaps the greatest has been to suppress innovation, individualism, and critical thinking within the Muslim world. Muhammad himself, as both the messenger of God and the founder of the Islamic super tribe, is revered as an irreproachable source of wisdom and a model of behavior for all time. To question his authority in any way is considered an unacceptable affront to the honor of Islam itself. So, you are not going to get individualistic free thinkers who stay within the Muslim tradition or have authority within Muslim communities that can lead a Muslim enlightenment or ensure that all of these people either convert or even assimilate or even integrate in the way that they are subordinate to the laws of the land over and above their religion. It's not going to happen. And there are low-level, innocuous ways that this manifests beyond things like honor-based violence and attempted murder of their own children, and that is just the casual littering and disregard for public spaces, a tragedy of the commons approach to our country. And this is summed up by the wonderful UK aesthetics account that you should be following because it documents the decline of modern Britain in real time. Thank you to Mr. Kunli Drukpa, my favourite independent journalist and anthropologist, for doing this. This is outside Marble Arch Station, and the Met Police have decided to put up signs in Arabic saying, "Cleanliness is half of your faith. Clean hearts reflected by clean surroundings keep London tidy." If cleanliness was half of their faith, you wouldn't need these signs. If they were doing this of their own accord, if it was part of their religious doctrine to which they hold so dear, they would not be doing this. This is also paid for by public money, of course, and we wouldn't need to do this if these people were not here in the first place. But in a passage that I tweeted out from Ayaan Hirsi Ali's book, this explains perfectly why littering, a tragedy of the commons approach to public spaces, is so common among people from the Muslim world. Quote, "As a translator for other Somalis who had arrived in Holland, Ayaan, saw this phenomenon in various forms. One was simply the clash of cultures when immigrant Muslims and native-born Dutch lived in close proximity to one another. In apartment complexes, the Dutch were generally meticulous about keeping common spaces free of any litter. The immigrants, however, would throw down wrappers, empty Coca-Cola cans and cigarette butts, or spit out the remnants of their chewed cat. The Dutch residents would grow incensed at this, just as they would grow incensed about the groups of children who would run about wild and unsupervised at all hours. It was easy for one family to have many children. If a man can marry up to 4 wives and have multiple children with each of them, the numbers grow quickly. The Dutch would shake their heads, and in reply, the veiled mothers would simply shrug their shoulders and say that it was God's will. Trash on the ground became God's will. Children racing around in the dark became God's will. Allah has willed it to be this way. It is there because Allah has willed it, and if Allah has willed it, Allah will provide. It is an unbreakable ring of circular logic. There is a fatalism that creeps into one's worldview when this life is seen as transitory and the next is seen as the only one that matters. Why pick up trash? Why discipline your children when none of these acts is stored up for any type of reward? Those are not the behaviors that mark good Muslims. They have nothing to do with praying or proselytizing." So, not only do they disrespect the law of the land in Western countries, not only do they see our morality as illegitimate, not only are their ears clogged up and deaf to our pleas to respect our laws as if we are their moral equals, because they don't see us as that, but the almost Gnostic belief that tomorrow may never come, that inshallah, literally everything that happens is a result of Allah's predetermined will, this leads to a kind of inability to plan for the long term, an unwillingness to ensure that your area is clean and that you act as a custodian for things that you impart onto future generations. And it means that there's no incentive to act as a considerate citizen. And so it means that they will just throw rubbish on their doorstep, treat the world outside their home as a wilderness, and do whatever they want when the mood strikes. And this is why I ended this particular tweet that did very well, by the way, over 1 million views. You do not understand how these people think. They will not produce the same civilization as us. A great cartoon that I actually saw someone post on X, and I can't find the original post, but I did find the cartoon on Google Books that explains how the third world think is this, from a kid's cartoon. This is the definition of a hole in a kid's picture book. Haggis the dog has a hole in his roof. He never fixed it because on rainy days it is too wet to work, and on sunny days it doesn't need fixing. These people live in the immediate here and now. They do not think that on the sunny day it would be a good idea to fix the roof because a rainy day might come. Instead, they just think, oh, it is raining now, so I can't do this. There is no step 2, 3, or 4 to their thinking. They are permanently on step 1. And trying to get them to address abstract hypotheticals or plan long term is basically impossible. Now, when I posted this, there were a number of comments accusing me of making things purely ideological or in the domain of ideas or religion, with the premise being that if you just change these people's ideas, they would be, again, indistinguishable in behavior from Western Europeans. That is not the case. What people that either say it is purely ideas or purely racial or ethnic fail to understand is that the impact of ideas on family structure and therefore lineage, parentage, things like intelligence or impulse control is symbiotic. They mutually reinforce one another. Islam justifies cousin marriage at scale because Muhammad married a cousin. Islam justifies polygamy at scale because Muhammad had multiple wives. Islam justifies child marriage because Muhammad married Aisha when she was 6 and consummated the marriage when she was 9. And so, when you have cousin marriage across the Muslim world, as documented in this excellent article for the Oxford Journal of Law and Religion by Patrick Nash, at rates of over and above 60 to 70% that we've recorded and know of, what is the hope of changing their mind? Very, very little. These people, and it's not the fault of the children that their parents are related, but many of these people are incapable of thinking individualistically because for generations, their parents have been blood related. This is a very difficult conversation to have, but this conversation is necessary because we now have millions of these people in our countries. And the prospect of integrating them, it is a fantasy. Total fantasy. That does not mean that we need to be cruel to these people, but it does mean we need to be realistic about the kind of civilization that importing people like this will create. And I just need to read some of the stats from this particular article because they will blow your mind. At the global level, around 80% of all marriages in history have been consanguineous. That means between cousins. At least 8.5% of all new births worldwide are to consanguineous parents. This is highly concentrated in the Muslim world and in Africa, by the way. 10% of all humanity practices cousin marriage, and 20% of the world's population live in communities preferring it. Cousin marriage predominates across the Middle East, West Asia, and North Africa, as well as among emigrants from these communities now residing in North America, Europe, and Australia. In this regional bloc, around 20 to 50% of all marriages are consanguineous, and the practice is most prevalent within the historic heartlands of Islam, Arabia, and its immediate environs, and the peripheries of the Muslim world furthest from those abutting Europe, Pakistan, Afghanistan, and sub-Saharan Africa. For example, it is least common in Morocco, 10 to 19%, and Turkey, 20 to 29%, moderately common in Syria and Iran, 30 to 39%, common in Sudan and Afghanistan, 40 to 49%, very common in Qatar and Saudi Arabia, 50 to 59%, and most common in Pakistan, 65%, and Kuwait, 68%. I'm so glad that the UK is taking in millions of Afghanis and Pakistanis. In some places, these rates may be starting to fall, perhaps in Saudi Arabia and Bangladesh. In most, they remain static. In others, they are rising, Afghanistan, British Pakistani diaspora. So, in the British Pakistani diaspora, cousin marriage rates are rising, so the problem is getting worse. Hence why, let's say, doctrinaire beliefs, like 52% of people, Muslims in Britain, wanting depictions of their Prophet Muhammad criminalized, about a third wanting Sharia law to become the law of the land, and Islam to become the official religion of the UK, and 3/4 of British Muslims believing that Hamas did nothing wrong on October 7th, is most concentrated among British-born, university-educated Muslims aged 18 to 30. So the most likely to assimilate by liberal logic are the least assimilated, and the most likely to practice cousin marriage. Within national and diasporic data, there are further local variations. In some provinces, rates are significantly higher than the national average. Various Middle Eastern provinces, 80.6 to regional 50%. Rural Pakistan, so like Mirpur, where Britain gets the majority of its Pakistanis from, 80%, 80 to national 65%. Bamyan in Afghanistan, 51 to national 46%. Sylhet in Bangladesh, 8.76 to national 6.64%. Across the world, first cousin marriage is the most commonly preferred degree. By contrast, the average for Western and other non-Muslim countries is typically well under 5%, often under 1%, as is the case in England, which gave rise to English individualism, according to Alan McFarlane's excellent book. And although rates for Jewish diasporas tend to correlate roughly with those of their host countries, they are significantly lower than those for Muslims. So this also isn't necessarily a problem in the Jewish community. Dr. Jonathan Anomaly's spoken about this before. He, as a geneticist, cites the Catholic Church's prohibition on cousin marriage as the reason why the West became individualistic and much more intelligent than the rest of the world, and therefore produced all of these wonderful innovations that the Muslim world and Africa are incapable of producing in the past and still at present, largely. And he explained that Jewish communities in the West actually have apps that compare their genetic compatibility to likely marital partners, because the communities are so small that the rate of intermarriage is actually, well, the risk of it is relatively high, and so to keep the rate low, they have to monitor this stuff. The Muslim world do the opposite. They actively encourage it, and if you try to break from these kinds of marriages, they will punish you with potentially fatal beatings. In certain communities, rates are greater still, most notably among Irish travellers, between 20 and 40%, and British Pakistanis, between 40 and 60% on average, but over 90% in multiple Bradford biradaris. And biradaris are Pakistani clans that govern certain sections of this country, particularly Bradford, as Ed Husain's Among the Mosques explains. And so, what kind of politics does this produce? You know, maybe we're going to get moderate Muslims coming out and explaining to the Muslim communities the benefits of integration, the benefits of assimilation, why cousin marriage is a bad thing. Well, there's reason to be pessimistic, because as Ed Husain, himself a Muslim, discovered while walking across the major Muslim towns and cities in Britain, and going into its mosques and speaking to their attendees, members of madrasas and their elders, even the moderate Muslims are keen on a caliphate. So he spoke here to a imam called Hasnain. I think it might be a pseudonym. He does say at the start that he has changed the names of some people to protect their identities, about children being born disabled from cousin marriages, and whether or not the mosque would be willing to speak to a local white liberal woman who runs a charity, probably government funded unfortunately, that does music and dance workshops for these children. And of course, music and dance and intersex socializing is haram in Islam. It's an opportunity for fitna, as I mentioned earlier. And this is one of the most chilling conversations I think I've ever read. I'm just going to read it in full. So, Imam Hasnain is in his late 30s, fully bearded and with an endearing smile that radiates sincerity. The charisma of the clerics must be one reason why they control the conduct of their communities so effectively, I surmise. So what brings you to Bradford, he asks Ed. I'm travelling to different cities around the UK, trying to get a sense of where we are as a country and how Muslims are adjusting to modern Britain. Ah, let me guess, you have another book on the way. You're a clever man, I reply, neither confirming nor denying his suspicions. And so he explains that he met this woman called Louise. I met this amazing woman this morning in Bradford. She's the director of a theatre charity in the Manningham neighbourhood, and her work is entirely about helping disabled children. But she told me that Muslims in Bradford are not engaging with the charity, and I suggested she should meet you. She is afraid to visit a mosque on her own. And he said, Brother Ed, she'll be my guest. We have the regular open days, and I will personally welcome her. So he seems willing to engage with the wider Western world at first. Our problems are far deeper than not engaging with art and theatre, though. There's widespread abuse of disabled children in the community. They're hidden away. Many of the Muslim parents just don't care about these children and take their social benefit money and use it to support their families, open shops back in Kashmir. So they send our tax money, mine and your tax money, back home. So the government benefits go to buy a new taxi or develop a shop in Kashmir. Most Pakistanis here have strong links to the Kashmir region. The money intended to help parents with the disabled children is used for the parents' benefit instead. We aren't even ready to think about art and theatre. How did Bradford become like this? Ed asks. It's painful to watch part of our country becoming so segregated. I mean, where are the white English people around here? I've hardly seen any. And these attitudes to the disabled seem so far from mainstream culture. Can you see the cultural difference? On this point, Imam Husnain becomes defensive. They're all around us, Ed. The white people are still here. It's only a few pockets of Muslims. You'll find the Muslim areas in the BD 1, 3, 5, 7, 8, and 9 postcodes. The rest are more mixed. It doesn't feel like that to me. Ed says, every taxi driver, every shop, every house I have seen seems to be Asian and Muslim. The odd Polish place, yes, but it's all Muslim shops for Hajj, money transfers, halal butchers and hijab shops. His warmth evaporates, Ed writes. The British do this everywhere they go, he asserts. Remember India. They divided the country and left the Kashmir issue unresolved, and now they blame the Indians and Pakistanis and urge them not to fight. They go to war in Iraq and create terrorism, then they tell us to stop complaining about foreign policy and deal with Islamic extremism. Do you know when Syrian refugees arrived in Britain, they sent many of them to Bradford? We have thousands of Syrians. The government said, look, there is a city with mosques and Muslims, let's send them there. Now the British say to us, you have mosques and refugees and too much religion in Bradford. They create the problem and they blame us. So if you scratch the surface of these community leaders, apparently in charge of assimilation efforts, appointed by our liberal government, and people like this judge who wanted to keep the honor-based nature of the crime from the public, if you scratch the surface of these people, you will find seething ethnic resentment, historical grudges that cannot be resolved, and yet they are in our country anyway. So they are hostile to the people, they impose upon us an inexpugnable collective racial guilt, and yet they do not admit to the problems that they themselves and their co-ethnics and their fellow Muslims, members of the Ummah, have created. Because Ed writes, his blaming of the British and casting Brits as the other creates a frostiness between us. He detects it too. I'm a proud Bradfordian, the Imam says. We complain to the local councillors about racism and segregation. They blame the MPs who are Labour blame the Tories, and the Tory government cuts. And then the government blames Brussels at my level in the mosques, and we are dealing with our youth. We can only see problems created from above and thrown at us. So here in Bradford and Yorkshire more generally, what are the top issues that appear in your inbox, Ed asks. And the Imam says, the police want us to come into our mosques and speak to the congregants about not grooming white girls. It has been an issue in the past. And, Ed says, the Imam says, I can't let that happen. And Ed says, why not? I ask aghast. Surely you've heard the facts about what happened in Rotherham, how Muslim men targeted non-white Muslim girls and non-Muslim white girls over the decades. And the Imam says, what do these men have to do with Islam? With a defensive shrug and the characteristic twist of the hand of Asian elders. There are two factors involved in those cases again and again. Drugs and alcohol. Does Islam permit these two things? Of course not. Yes, they have Muslim names and Pakistani backgrounds, but our mosques are not responsible for their criminality. These issues will be with us for a long time in Leeds, Bradford, Halifax, Keighley and other cities. But unless the police can prove it is not down to drugs and alcohol, we will not open the mosque doors to them. Number one, who is giving them the drugs and alcohol? The Pakistani Muslim men. Number two, Taj Hargay, who is an imam at the Oxford Islamic congregation. He has explained from within these communities, the mosques and madrasas, mainly Deobandi, largely funded by the Saudis and Qataris, are appointing foreign or even radical British trained imams and teaching their congregations to see white girls, kafir, as easy meat and available for exploitation. And these men, who often have wives in other countries and go on foreign holidays to have polygamous or even extramarital relationships, are entitled in their view, to use girls outside the Ummah for their sexual gratification. So they see them, as Jack Straw, the former Labour Home Secretary, once said, as easy meat, or no better than a piece of chewing gum on the road, as one of the perpetrators himself said, or as one of the perpetrators said in a transcript read out by Katie Lamb in a famous speech, they are here to F white girls and F the government. So there is a racial, religious, and political tinge to these crimes, and yet the imams, the so-called moderate community leaders in Bradford, who themselves are called upon by the government to deal with these problems, don't care. They don't take responsibility. Instead, they say that we are at fault. In 2010, they brought in laws to end corporal punishment. We as teachers in the mosque have no power over the children. They become teenagers and have no respect for us. The British limited us to the four walls of the mosque and then stopped our ability to control children, and now they're asking us to fix the problem of the grooming of white girls for sex. If not, they will blame the mosques. So they think that because they can't beat their children anymore without social services stepping in, that explains why a number of Pakistani Muslim men are abusing white children, torturing, killing. All manner of other atrocities are inflicted upon white children because apparently Muslim parents can't beat their own sons. Again, moderate Muslim community leader that's happening here. Then he goes on to complain about Brexit, and then Ed Husain asks him about the Salman Rushdie riots in Bradford. After Rushdie wrote the Satanic Verses, British Muslims called for a fatwa against him. They burned copies of his book. Quote, "The Imam falls silent. I tried to read the book. It doesn't make sense. Pir Maruf's main student, Haji Likwat, organised the protests." You mean the book burnings, Ed said. "Look, it's not like that. Yes, books were burned, but it was a matter of love." Yes, books were burned, but it was a matter of love. You have to understand that when you play with emotions, anything can happen. Even in the West, in matters of love, we see death. Look at Romeo and Juliet. And then he says, "The answer lies in your question. We also have the freedom to respond as we wish to people who insult the Prophet Muhammad. I am not saying kill Rushdie, no, but others have and will continue to do so." So even if he is not calling for the death of Salman Rushdie, who has now lost an eye because of the fatwa against him, this moderate British imam the government relies on for its integration efforts is justifying those calling for his death. And this is common. This is in Bradford. This is one of the most populous Muslim enclaves in the country. This is one of the epicenters where the grooming gangs have been operated, and he takes no responsibility and has outright ethnic resentment towards the native white British. And he says, and there's a bit later on here where Ed just goes, "Can't you see where this is going? This is not going to end well. Can you not see the direction of travel here, Imam? Where we are heading, there are only three possible outcomes." And so he says, the three outcomes: we keep these ghettos, close the doors of the mosque, and face a race war, a religious war. You're already seeing football fans and army veterans supporting Tommy Robinson. Secondly, we self-deport or get deported. That's by far the best solution. You've heard Trump tell US Somali congresswomen go back. Or thirdly, we modernize, integrate, and live in peace and harmony with all our neighbors and contribute to Western society. And so, the Imam blames us again. He says, "Whoever is instigating these conflicts with Muslims must take a step back. We have done no wrong. It's a free society, isn't it?" And then he goes, and this is one of the most disturbing parts of the entire book. "You know, these politicians and police people always call us for support and help. They say give us a structure, a single leader. Many of them deal with me because I can help them access a large section of the Muslim community. And our students ask us, when is the Caliphate coming? I always say to them, do your part. Qualify, take to community service and the mosque, and the Caliphate will come. When it comes, we will swear allegiance to it because we must, as the fiqh, Islamic jurisprudence, books command. Until we have that single Muslim leadership, and we give the oath of loyalty to the Caliph, we won't feel fully comfortable, and the British won't have the singular structure they demand of us." All of this because, he says, ask anybody in the streets out there if they feel comfortable in Britain, and they'll say no. So, the point is, integration to them means a caliphate. There is no prospect of integration. Most are not capable of it. None are inclined to do so, and their definition of integration will be the total cultural displacement and ethnic displacement of the native British people. If we continue to run this mass demographic and cultural experiment, we will not have the same country at the end of it. conversations about integration, we are well past that, because you do not understand how these people think.